going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Crypt podcast. I hope you're all doing well. Today is October 23rd, 2025. At the time of this recording, it is 1:17 p.m. in the afternoon. It is a cloudy, overcast day. I'm in the house with my robe on, drinking something warm. So on this episode, we got a funeral home screw up. Now, I've covered a few on this channel. It seems it happened more often than I think all of us are comfortable with admitting. It comes out of Forest Lawn, Covina Hills out there in Southern California. The prestigious Forest Lawn. Forest Lawn has more than one location in Southern California, the Los Angeles area. And they're very, a lot of celebrities are buried at at different locations, and they're very prestigious. And the one Covina Hills area location screwed up majorly. It was a body and a wrong casket. So, a Los Angeles family walks into a memorial at Forest Lawn, Covina Hills, and sees a stranger in their loved one's casket. Now, can you even imagine that moment? You're walking in expecting peace, closure, and suddenly you're staring at someone who isn't your family. Now, that's every person's worst nightmare, in my opinion. The man was 44-year-old Joey Espinoza, who passed from heart failure. He was 44 years old. That's young. This was a family in shock already. And then you have this added trauma. It's unthinkable, what they were feeling. So when the family alerted the staff, they couldn't locate Joey's body for over an hour. An hour? They couldn't find it for an hour. That's not just a delay. That's 60 minutes of panic, disbelief, and wondering, where is he? Reports say 2 rooms, 2 wrong bodies, and total chaos. Now, this wasn't just a small mix-up. This was a full systems failure. 2 wrong rooms? That's not a fluke. That's a breakdown. During the confusion, a family member suffered a heart attack mid-service. Wow, this story just keeps hitting harder. Someone actually collapsed from the stress. It shows how emotionally explosive these moments are when grief turns into shock. You know what I mean? The family's attorney calls it negligence. Forest Lawn called it a scheduling error. A scheduling error? That's the kind of phrase that makes families furious. It feels way too casual for something this serious. And if you guys do or don't disagree with me on that, throw it out in the comment box below, for real. After the ordeal, the family says they were offered $200 after paying nearly $20,000. They were offered $200. That's like a slap in the face. You don't put a dollar sign on emotional devastation. You can't. You can't. Forest Lawn declined to comment due to pending litigation. And of course, legally, they can't say much. But silence always feels cold when emotions are this raw. Now let's unpack how all this unfolded step by step, and what we know from reports that have been released so far. The family arrives to a peaceful setting, flowers, quiet music, a program with Joey's name. The calm before the storm. You're trying to hold it together, and then everything changes. Relatives realize instantly that's not him. Could you imagine being in that room if that was one of your family members? I mean, that room, I'm sure, I can imagine it freezing. The kind of disbelief that hits your stomach before your brain catches up. And then quickly, staff moves them to another room, and wrong body again. That second mistake probably shattered any trust left. Now it's panic, confusion, and anger all at once. So finally, Joey's body was finally located after roughly an hour. And I'll tell you this, I'll bet you an hour feels like forever when you're in an emotional free fall. It's chaos where there should have been peace. And to boot, a relative collapses mid-service, later hospitalized and on life support. And that's, how fragile people are in grief. One wrong thing can send somebody into a total shutdown. And I'm sure this person was probably of a certain age as well. And they didn't need that kind of stress and grief. The service goes and it finishes, but the damage is irreversible. You can't hit reset on something like that. The memories seared into that family's minds forever. They can never get that. They can never change that moment. So let's talk about the name behind all this, Forest Lawn, and why this shook people across California. Forest Lawn is one of the biggest cemetery networks in California, known for celebrity burials and grand memorial parks. I've been to a couple of their locations. They're like the gold standard. So when something goes wrong there, it hits harder. People think if Forest Lawn can't get it right, who can? They rely on precise scheduling, documentation, and identification systems. Now that's the part that's haunting. These systems are supposed to prevent exactly this kind of mix-up. And the allegation? Those systems completely failed. And also, when you're dealing with people's loved ones, oops isn't good enough. Every tag, every form, every body, it all has to match. No exceptions. So the legal protections here. California law gives families legal protection when remains are mishandled. And that's a good thing, because this kind of trauma deserves accountability. Common claims include negligence, breach of contract, and emotional distress. And you're not just paying for a burial, you're paying for dignity, accuracy, and respect, in my opinion. Here's a key case. Christensen versus Superior Court. Family members can recover for emotional distress if remains are mishandled. That case changed everything. It officially said grief is real damage and the law should recognize it. And I agree with that. That is grief. It could be very damaging. There's specialized law firms now that focus on funeral mishandling cases. And you know what? It just boggles my mind that it's sad that there's enough demand for that. But it shows this happens more often than you think. And if you've been listening to this podcast long enough, I've covered more than one of these types of things. And the plaintiffs are I'm sure, arguing, we paid $20,000 for dignity. Instead, we got chaos. That's the whole case right there. You're buying peace. And the funeral home delivered trauma. That's, yeah. And if any of you out there who have paid for a funeral know that it is a pretty penny. and you don't want stuff to go wrong. You can't afford to have stuff go wrong. And the two wrong bodies shown, 1 hour delay and one medical emergency. To me, every detail of that day screams preventable. Now, the defense may say clerical error, quickly corrected, tragic but not malicious. Sure, mistakes happen, but this is business. The bar has to be higher than that. You're handling sacred trust. The defense could argue causation. Was the heart attack directly caused by the mix-up? And that's where these cases get messy in court. Emotionally, it feels clear. Legally, it's trickier. Other cases in California that have, where there's been mix-ups. There was a Bay Area family said their daughter was accidentally cremated and ashes sent to the wrong home. It's chilling to think how many of these stories start with a simple mistake. The national trend, similar lawsuits over mix-ups and lost remains. That's a national trend, it seems like. Every time one makes the news, people start calling their funeral homes asking, can you provide? So the Forest Lawn case reignited public conversation on accountability. This one cut deep because of who they are. Their reputation made it feel even more personal to the public. So next we'll switch gears. How do we prevent this? What can families and funeral homes do better? So most errors come from chain of custody breaks or poor labeling. All it takes is one mistyped name, one missing tag, and the whole system collapses. And it really does. Staffing shortages and double booked viewings increase risk. Now that's the human side. People under pressure. Too few hands, too many services in one day. Maybe they should scale those back a little bit per day. Lack of oversight or verification protocol is often to blame. We trust the process blindly. But who is double checking the process itself? A preventative checklist I found. Ask for their chain of custody policy in writing. You, as the consumer, have every right to see how they track remains from pickup to casket. Require two-factor ID before viewing. Name plus tag or photo. A 30-second check could save a lifetime of trauma. It really could. Get a printed run of show for the service. You want to know who's handling what and when. Assign a family liaison and somebody empowered to pause the service. One person should have the authority to say, stop, this isn't right. Document the ID check if you're comfortable with it. If you're present and you could document it, even a quick photo can be peace of mind. Ask about refunds or credits in advance. Now, you don't plan for problems, but you prepare in case. Request an incident report if anything goes wrong. You'll need names, times, and actions taken. Trust me, it matters later on. Funeral work is sacred. These people handle our last goodbyes. They deserve respect, but also accountability. When trust breaks, it's almost impossible to restore. And, once you see that wrong face in the casket, you never unsee it. That's going to be in your memory for life. Real reform means transparency and empathy. Not just apologies, actual systems that protect the families. Possible outcomes from this settlement, reform, or trial? Most likely this ends quietly in court, but the echoes won't fade soon. The family takes damages for emotional distress and humiliation. Oh, of course. It's not about money. It's about acknowledgement that this can't happen ever again. Legal precedent supports recovery for emotional trauma. And it should. Emotional damage is real damage. It is. So, Forest Lawn declined comment. Litigation ongoing. And until there's a resolution, this story will hang in the air for every grieving family. So the source is CBS, Los Angeles, legal filings, California case law. Everything discussed tonight is drawn from verified reports. No speculation, just facts and empathy. Oh man, this is, let me know in the comment box below if you guys ever experienced anything, during a funeral or planning a funeral. If you've ever experienced anything similar or any kind of snafu or mix-up or whatever. Because dignity isn't a luxury. It's something every family deserves when saying goodbye. And that's why stories like this matter. And they really do. This happens far too often. Far too often. All right, guys, that's it for this episode. Let me know in the comment box below how you felt. Please rate this, a thumbs up, a rating, a like, a subscribe, whichever platform you're hearing this on. Thank you all so much, and I will talk to you later.